On the next block on your left, one of our newest memorials here in downtown D.C. It's a memorial to our 34th President, Dwight D. Eisenhower. In the background of the memorial, there's a large tapestry. It looks different times of the day, considering the sun is shining on it. It's Normandy Beach during peacetime. The second group of statues coming up on your left, the Supreme Allied Commander General Eisenhower addressing the 101st Division on the eve of the D-Day invasion. The building on the other side of the tapestry to our left is the Department of Education, also started by President Eisenhower. On your right, one of the most visited museums in the entire world is currently being renovated. It's the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum. Inside, everything from the Wright brothers' original 1903 flyer, the Charles Lindbergh Spirit of St. Louis, Chuck Yeager's jet, the Bell X-1, the glamorous Glennis named after his wife, first jet to break the sound barriers on display. Now you might have seen on the news there's been several successful flights of a small helicopter on the surface of Mars. The name of that helicopter is Ingenuity. Well, on Ingenuity is a piece of cloth from one of the wings of the Wright brothers' original 1903 flyer. So the Wright brothers made it all the way out to Mars. And speaking of the Wright brothers, the building to your left is the Wilbur Building. The next building on the left is the Orville Building. It's the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration. It's part of the Department of Transportation. On the next block on your right, the large circular building is currently being renovated. It's the Joseph Hirshhorn Modern Art Museum. Joseph Hirshhorn donated over 10,000 pieces from his private collection to the start of that museum. Just to the right of the Hirshhorn is an outdoor sculpture garden, part of the National Gallery of Art. The sculpture garden is free to visit, and it is back open to the public. Now folks, we're about to take a left here and head into the smallest quadrant of Washington, D.C., which is southwest. The Capitol divides our city into 4 quadrants, east southwest. You have to pay attention to the directionals and the ends of the street signs, because the letters and the numbers of the streets repeat themselves in each quadrant. Any time you see Department of, it means it's part of our executive branch of government. Now the architectural style of the building to your right is known as brutalism. It's very stark, it's very geometric. You'll see a lot of government buildings that were built here in the Federal Triangle from the mid-1950s to the late 1970s, built in that brutalistic architectural style. Those circles and squares is a defense mechanism in case the city was ever invaded, even post-military era. Today you'll find the rival memorial statues located in it. Now I'll be honest with you, until I became a tour guide, a real wharf. Inside the wharf you'll find retail shops, restaurants, live music venues. The largest music venue is the Anthem. Up to 6,000 people can attend a show at a time. Now straight ahead of us on the Potomac River is where you can catch the water taxi. The water taxi will take you across the Potomac over to Old Town Alexandria, Virginia. It'll take you to the oldest part of Washington, D.C., which is Georgetown. The water taxi gets you as far as Maryland, where the National Harbor, MGM casinos are located. At Potomac is an Algonquin Indian group beach trading place, or meeting place. Coming up just ahead of us on the right, you'll soon see a circular structure that's elevated on the right. It's Benjamin Banneker Park. Benjamin Banneker was born a free African American in our country. He was an astronomer, he was a surveyor. George Washington was so impressed with his work, he hired Benjamin Banneker to help him lay out the borders of Washington, D.C. Benjamin Banneker was put in charge of the border marker stones that mark the points of the city. Many of them are still in place today. When you look at D.C. on a map, originally the city was in the shape of a diamond. Each side of the diamond, 10 miles in length, making the whole city 100 miles square. It's stated in our Constitution that our federal city be no larger than 100 miles square. Well, as time went on, land was eventually retroceded back to Virginia. Falls Church, Alexandria, Arlington are located. So today our nation's capital is a little over 67 square miles. Now in 67 square miles of city, how many Starbucks coffees do you think we have? 81 last time I checked online. Discover the suburbs. They realized to get a bigger house and a bigger yard for their money. These pre-planned communities outside the city. People started moving away to Virginia and Maryland. Population didn't significantly start increasing again here in D.C. until the year 2000. One of the biggest reasons was all the traffic. It takes so long to get to work in the morning, then have to turn around at the end of the day and file that traffic move back home. A lot of people that work in D.C. and move back in the city again. Today our nation's capital's population is a little over 670,000. Coming up on your right, the International Spy Museum. The museum showcases the history of espionage from Moses to the Cold War. And if you look through the window on the ground floor to your right, you'll see a very recognizable sports car. It's a 1964 DB5 Aston Martin, the original car that James Bond drove in the movie Goldfinger. Now, if you like that car, you can buy one exactly like it. A company made 20 exact replicas of that vehicle. They were taking orders up until last year. Well, good news, they have some left over. It'll only set you back $2.5 million. Now, straight ahead of us, Sackler Art Gallery. It's followed on the right by the Freer Art Gallery. And in both of those galleries, you'll find an extensive collection of Asian art on display. Now, we're about to travel into these large arches. This is the U.S. Department of Agriculture. It was established back in 1862 to provide U.S. farmers with better seed for their crops. Back then, you would have found these buildings here. You found a huge field of cattle grazing built upon the Union Army with Frederick during the Civil War. Coming up on your right, down here above the treetops, 555 feet, 5.8 inches tall, Washington Monument. Ground was broken on the monument in 1848. It's completed in 1884. It's dedicated in 1885.
Washington Monument
Finally opened to the public in 1888. It took him a while to finish the steam elevator that was located in the center. Back then, you had a choice. You could take that steam elevator to the top. It took you about 15 minutes. Or you could walk the 897 steps to the top and check out the view. Today, the monument's back open again. There's an electric elevator. It takes about 70 seconds to get to the top. They closed the steps off to the public. They were tired of rescuing people halfway up, halfway down, especially during the summer months when it gets really hot like today. Just ahead of us on the left, the red brick building with the clock tower, that is the original Bureau of Engraving and Printing. So they first printed our money. Today it's office space for the U.S. Forestry Service. Now when you mention the Secret Service, you usually think of an organization that protects the president. That is one of their responsibilities. The Secret Service was originally formed to combat counterfeiters after the Civil War. It's kind of eerie. They were still laying on his desktop in the White House the evening President Lincoln was assassinated at the Ford's Theater. Just past this red brick building on your left seems to the U.S. Holocaust Museum. The museum honors and pays tribute to all those that perished and all those that survived the horrific ordeal known as the Holocaust. The sculpture closest to the museum to your left is representative of a busted up swastika. The sculpture closest to us is titled The House Turned Upside Down. Now the Holocaust Museum is free to visit, but you have to have a time ticket. Those tickets are free. You can obtain one by going on their site online. And that's the best way to do it, because that way you know exactly what time you can visit the museum. If you just show up and get a ticket, they might not let you in right away. Coming up on your left is where they print our money today. It's the current Bureau of Engraving and Printing. The paper money is actually 75% cotton, 25% linen to make it much more durable. The only other place money is printed in the United States is Fort Worth, Texas. And this particular Bureau of Engraving and Printing prints all of our naturalization certificates for our country and all the official White House invitations. Just off to your right, the crown jewel, the tidal basin, the Jefferson Memorial. Surrounding the tidal basin are over 3,000 cherry blossom trees. They were a gift to us from Tokyo, Japan in 1912. Every spring we celebrate that gift with the annual Cherry Blossom Festival. It is usually one of the most visited and photographed times here in our nation's capital. Now as we cross this small bridge and look across the tidal basin to your far right, the skyline you'll It helps keep fresh tidal water coming out of the Washington Channel and Washington Harbor, so they don't have to be dredged quite so often. Now we're getting closer to the Jefferson Memorial. Thomas Jefferson was known as our 1, 2, 3 man. He was our first Secretary of State, second Vice President, and third President of the United States. All responsible for almost doubling the size of our country during his administration of the Louisiana Purchase. The 19-foot bronze statue of Thomas Jefferson in the center of the memorial is looking directly across the tidal basin towards the White House. This memorial was dedicated in 1943 by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. We were in World War II at the time. They wouldn't allocate enough bronze to make that large of a statue. Bronze was considered to be a precious metal during the war, so a plaster one was put in its place. 3 years after the war ended, they replaced it with the bronze one that stands there today. Now all this area off to our right, before this was dredged out to become the tidal basin, this was all sandy shoreline coming off the Potomac River from our left. This is where Washingtonians would come on the weekends to sunbathe. This was their beach. Up until 1935, pretty close to where the Jefferson Memorial stands today, was a public bathhouse. Now the area down to our left is known as Haynes Point. You'll find picnic areas down there. There's a municipal golf course located down there. Now we're about to take a right here and cross the Inlet Bridge. And as we cross, if you look to your right, you'll have what I consider to be the best view of the Washington Monument on the tour. Now if you look to your left across the stone bridge, the flat building with all the windows, that is the Pentagon. The Pentagon is our country's largest federal building, 6.5 million square feet. The open area coming up on our right, today it's known as Potomac Park, but originally this is our first airstrip. The first planes took off and landed here in the city. On your left, the body of water you see flows all the way from West Virginia to the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay. That is the Potomac River. And across the Potomac to your left, that's Virginia. And if you look above the trees to your left, you'll see 3 metal spires going in different directions. The U.S. Air Force Memorial. They're representative of jet contrails, the Flying Thunderbirds during their famous bombers formation. Farther ahead of us across Potomac, we'll find Arlington National Cemetery. We have 2 U.S. presidents laid to rest there. President William Howard Taft, President John F. Kennedy. On the hillside of the cemetery, you'll see a mansion. It's known as the Arlington House. It's also known as the Custis Lee Mansion. Robert E. Lee lived in that mansion until the outbreak of the Civil War. Now, Lee was asked to head up the Union Army, and Lee declined. He said he'd never bear arms against a fellow Virginian. So he seceded south to Richmond, the capital of the Confederacy. The president served that many terms. He saw us through the Great Depression and most of World War II. And one of those rooms is a statue of President Roosevelt, seen in a wheelchair. He's got a blanket over his lap. His little dog Phalo sitting right next to him. Look closely at Phalo's nose. You notice it's very worn down. That's because people rub it for good luck. Coming up on your right is where you'll find a memorial to the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Now this time of year from the street, it's impossible to see because of the trees. There's a 30-foot sculpture of the Reverend King. He's carved out of what's known as the Stone of Hope. He's emerging from the mountain of despair. The artist, Lee Epstein, purposely did not complete all the details on the statue to symbolize the fact that the Reverend King's life was cut short. He wasn't able to complete everything he set out to do. The pose is taken from a famous photograph of the Reverend King standing in front of his desk, overlooking speeches he'd written and prepared, but unfortunately did not live long enough to deliver. Now most people remember having heard audio or seen video of the Reverend King's famous address was given from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial on August 28, 1963, during the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. He gave that speech in front of over 200,000 people live. Many historians consider that 15-minute speech to be the height of the 60s civil rights movement. A lot of people don't realize that the Reverend King addressed the nation just several years prior in the exact same steps of the Lincoln Memorial. In 1957, he gave a speech called Give Us the Ballot. Now straight ahead of us, you'll soon see the Arlington Memorial Bridge. bridge. The bridge symbolically links the North with the South during the Civil War. The North being the Lincoln Memorial coming up on our right, and the South being the Custis Lee Mansion on the hillside and Arlington National Cemetery to our left. At night, when the lights come on the bridge, it draws a straight line between the two. But folks, if you come back over here a little earlier than the time we decide on, and for some reason the trolley's not here, don't panic. I didn't decide to just leave you behind. It either means the park policeman chased me away, or a large group of coach buses pulled in here and they needed the space to unload. But I will be back at the time we decide on. In fact, let's make that time, folks, 10 after 1. 1:10. Meet me back over here to continue the tour. 1:10.
അടുത്ത് ലിങ്കൺ മെമ്മോറിയലാണ് കേട്ടോ. നമ്മൾ ആ വന്ന ബസ്സിൽ ഒരു അരമണിക്കൂർ ഒരു ഇടവേളയുണ്ട്. അപ്പം ഈ അരമണിക്കൂറിനകത്ത് നമുക്ക് വേണമെങ്കിൽ ഇതിനകത്തൊക്കെ കയറി നോക്കിയിട്ടൊക്കെ വരാം. ഇതിനകത്തൊരു വലിയൊരു സ്റ്റാച്ചു ഒക്കെ വെച്ചിട്ടുണ്ടെന്നാ പുള്ളി പറഞ്ഞു അതിനകത്ത് അനൗൺസ് ചെയ്തപ്പോഴേ. അപ്പം ഈ അരമണിക്കൂറിനകത്ത് നമുക്ക് ഇതിനകത്ത് കയറി സ്റ്റാച്ചു എല്ലാം കാണുന്ന നോക്കിയിട്ട് വരാം. അതുകൊണ്ട് ആ കാണുന്നത് വാഷിങ്ടൺ മോനുമെൻ്റ്, നേരത്തെ കാണിച്ചില്ലായിരുന്നു. ആ മോനുമെൻറ്റിൻ്റെ ബാക്കിൽ കാണുന്നതാണ് ക്യാപിറ്റൽ ബിൽഡിങ്. അതിൻ്റെ ഫ്രണ്ടിൽ കിടക്കുന്നതിന് റിഫ്ലക്ഷൻ പൂളെന്നാണ് പറയുന്നത്. കാരണം അതിൻ്റെ മോനുമെൻറ്റിൻ്റെ മൊത്തം റിഫ്ലക്ഷൻ കാണാൻ വേണ്ടിയിട്ടുള്ളത്. ഏതായാലും നമുക്ക് അകത്തോട്ട് പോകുന്നു.